Hey, good evening. It's Tuesday, April 4th. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to my channel, Everyday Talk 24/7. I'm going to continue looking at Easter week, Tuesday. And there's so much material here that I can't possibly get into it. So I'm going to try and give you a theme of what's happening and encourage you to look at it. And the passages that relate to Tuesday on Easter week are these. I'm just going to give you the books, and then you'll see the numbers on the screen for where you can find them. So you want to look in Matthew, you want to look in Mark, look in Luke, and finally in John. And I'll give you the passages where you can find references to Tuesday of Easter week. Remember, we're doing kind of a video documentary as we're working through this. And we stopped on Monday with Jesus coming to the temple and wiping out all the money changers and instructing people about the way things should be. And said, this is not a house where we make money. This is a house of prayer. He cursed the fig tree in the morning, and then he goes back. They go back to Bethany, just a couple-mile walk. And then Tuesday, they come back to Jerusalem. And it begins with Jesus. They're walking by the fig tree, and they're seeing that it had withered from the day before. And Jesus reminded them about why he had cursed the fig tree. And then you have these narratives that are packed in, these stories that so much of our Gospels are familiar to us. They're happening on this Tuesday. And it's like, wow. And one of our really faithful viewers asked me this question. Kelly said, what about, we give a lot of significance to Christmas, but do we give this much significance to Easter? And in just terms of the sheer weight of the biblical material, we have way more data about Easter than we do about Christmas. And don't misunderstand, Christmas is cool. We need to be encouraged about it and celebrate it. But in contrast, the amount of sheer data that is given to us, the information, what the Holy Spirit has given to us about these events of Easter week, need to give us a window just to the importance of the significance of Easter. And one of the themes that I'm realizing as I've been looking over these passages in preparation to talk to you about them is that one thing that Jesus is doing is he's warning the people about the wickedness of the religious leaders. Their interest in money, their greed, and their lack of compassion for God's people. So religious leaders who are fixated on money, fixated on power for themselves, and to the point where they're not really caring for people. Jesus is warning the disciples about this, because in just 4 days' time, he's going to be gone from the earth in the way that he is now. And we should take notice of this. We should evaluate our religious establishment, our leaders. Are they fixated on money? Are they fixated on personal power? And are they neglecting the care of people for the benefit of the religious organization, the church, the ministry, whatever? And these passages at Easter week, they remind us about this. They tell us about this. I'm just going to clip through a couple things in Matthew's Gospel, but you can do them, all of them, in Matthew's Gospel. They question Jesus' authority in the temple courts. And remember, they're upset because what had he done yesterday in the temple courts? He cleaned house. So the religious leaders are questioning him, hey, how do you do this? Whose authority do you do this? And this is where Jesus sets them up. He says, well, tell me. I'll answer your question if you'll answer mine. John the Baptist, on whose authority did he do this, his own or God's? Well, they were trapped, because if they said God's authority, then Jesus could ask them, well, hey, how come you didn't follow him? But if they say on John's authority, they would upset the people because the people held John in high regard. So they did what leaders typically do. They said, we don't know. We can't answer that. And Jesus said, well, then neither will I tell you. But it's kind of set the theme here. They question the authority of Jesus. Remember, there's the disciples who love Jesus but haven't figured it out yet. They're kind of in a guilty state of cluelessness, not listening to him. The people who are right at this point eager to follow Jesus, they're still in that praise mode from Sunday. And then there are the authorities themselves, the religious leaders, who have one thing in mind: killing Jesus, which is what we read about. So he's in this very hostile environment of people who are plotting to kill him, and who in fact will. And Jesus is the only one that knows how all this is going to play out. People are waiting, they're hoping that he'll be the Messiah and restore the kingdom. He does, but it's a very different kingdom. So the stories that we read here, we have the parable of the two sons in Matthew, the parable of the tenants, the parable of the wedding banquet, paying taxes to Caesar, marriage at the resurrection, the greatest commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, which again was a question that the religious leaders were trying to trick him with, trying to trip him up. He's warning them, don't trust the religious establishment. There's signs of the end of the age. There's the parable of the virgins. All these things are happening on Tuesday. And when you look at the other Gospels, you get this massive influx of data. And this telling us we need to pay attention to this Easter week and the tremendous lessons that are here. Christmas is cool, but Easter is about the resurrection. This is the week that matters. The birth of Jesus doesn't matter if this resurrection does not go as God has promised and planned. This is the key portion. And there's a warning here. Don't trust the religious establishment. Don't trust those people who are about power, who are about money, and not caring for God's people. Get that message clearly in your heart, so you won't be sucked into the way that the people were at the time, so that you won't be sucked into winding up cursing Jesus and screaming for his death, just as these good folks were. Perhaps one thing that cements this story more than any other, and these are hard words, but we've got to grasp them. Jesus is telling folks about what it really means to serve God. He says, while all the people were, this is in Luke's Gospel, chapter 20, verse 45. And we're going to read through chapter 21, verse 4. Listen to this. While all the people were listening, Jesus said to his disciples, beware of the teachers of the law. This whole theme, he's warning them. Beware of the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes, love to be greeted in the marketplaces, and have the most important seats in the synagogue and the places of honor at banquets. Sound like many of our religious leaders? Now notice verse 47. They devour widows' houses, and for a show make lengthy prayers. Such men will be punished most severely. They're not caring for the widows. They're devouring their houses. And here's a passage which is so often taken out of context. But notice, this is where the chapter breaks, not very helpful. The next line is in verse 1 of chapter 21. As he looked up, after he says, they devour widows' houses and they make a show of lengthy prayers, is what these people in power do. As he looked up, Jesus saw the rich putting their gifts into the temple treasury. He also saw a poor woman put in 2 very small copper coins. I tell you the truth, he said, this poor widow has put in more than all the others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in all that she had to live on. See, this is an example of widows' houses being devoured. They were supposed to care for the fatherless and the widow, not take their last dime, literally, their last penny. And the religious leaders saw this. And Jesus is saying, this is not commendable. This is a condemnation. A condemnation on the religious leaders because they have devoured her house. There is no command anywhere to put your last dime into the offering plate. But this is what was happening. This is the problem. And this just highlights for us the very things I've been telling you about, warning you about, was what Jesus is warning us about here in these last days. People who are about power, who are about money, and don't care for God's people, which is what we saw here in Luke's gospel. Something to think about. There's severe warnings, but God's beautiful blessing on us so that we can be aware when people are not serving God, but serving themselves. May we be warned so that we understand what Jesus is telling us. Because these people who were in power are the people who were longing to kill Jesus, and they did. We need to be aware of them and not follow them. And that's the thought for this Tuesday on Easter week. Thanks so much for being here. Again, comments, questions, I'd love to hear them. Thanks so much for being here, and Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow on Wednesday. Good night. Thank you so much for watching. It is such a huge encouragement.